Hey everyone, I'm Deepak, founder of pmcurve.com and author of the book Tech Simplified for PMs and Entrepreneurs. In this video, we are going to talk about defensibility in AI products. Now, as we all know, we are seeing a lot of new products launched on top of large language models like GPT, Gemini every day. In fact, if you go to Product Hunt and search around any sort of writing assistant, or meeting assistant, you'll find a lot of products launched in this area. Now, why is that a problem? If you look like if a lot of products are getting launched in a particular area or for a particular topic, the biggest question that arises in the mind of founders and PMs is what is going to be the defensibility of these products? And if you go to Google and do a simple search on what is the defensibility of large language models or products built on top of large language models, you will see that very, very clearly. A lot of people are actually writing about this topic in general. The reason is because if it's so easy to make like LLM based products out of the box, the barriers of entry become so low that anybody can launch these products, and which is why we are seeing a plethora of products like launching on top of these LLMs. The second is, even if you become successful by getting some traction or you got some customers initially, as you pick traction, as you grow, as you start growing very, very fast, what will happen is some incumbent can enter and threaten whatever you have built so far because they have the capital and they have the distribution. So think of like you're creating a writing assistant and you have actually sort of built in top of GPT-4 or GPT 3.5. And now you are gaining traction because it's a specific use case built for writers who write non-fiction. As soon as Notion or some other writing app realizes that this is going to be a good market for them to either like monetize or a good market for them in terms of distribution, they are going to come after you, right? So that is why like we are so concerned about defensibility, that initial traction that we get or initial PMF that we are seeing might not be the reflection of the long-term sustainability of the business. So the question becomes, in an era where every company is trying to launch some AI products, how do you think about it as a PM or a founder? And possibly the best mental model to think around that is thin versus thick wrappers. Now let me explain thin wrappers and then thick wrappers, and then we'll talk about thin versus thick wrappers. So this is a great meme to explain thin wrappers, which I found on internet. It's basically somebody is saying like we are an AI startup, but if you look closely, if you look close enough, what you realize is it's just an API call to GPT-3. So a lot of, in fact, support chatbots that are built by even bigger companies are just like an API call to GPT-3, and they have used their data to fine tune the models, but a lot of times even the fine tuning is not happening. And that is a thin wrapper, because what we have done is we have taken GPT-3, which is a large language model, and we have added, a thin wrapper on top of it, and then we are serving it to the customers. So thin wrappers, the traits or attributes of thin wrappers would be like the large language model interface does not change as much. In fact, like if you look at chatbots, the interface of ChatGPT and these chatbots would have minimal changes. Possibly the branding changes, possibly the color and a little bit of UI changes. But fundamentally, it's a chatbot, something which ChatGPT has already built and sort of displayed that. The second thing is these sort of thin wrappers are using directly the APIs. They're not adding a lot of additional logic on top of it. So suppose you are creating a chatbot for education. Now in this, like you ask a question to this specific chatbot that somebody has created, and you ask the same question to GPT-3. If the answer to both are same, there is a good chance that there is little to no additional logic that this particular chatbot has, right? So when you use directly the API, the thing is like anybody can use these APIs directly, and anybody can sort of build the same product that you have built. And that is why the defensibility becomes questionable in thin wrappers again. The third thing about thin wrappers, why they are getting popular, is because they're easier and quicker to deploy. So suppose some founder comes to a PM and says that we have to build some AI product because our competition has built it. More often than not, the first choice is thin wrappers because they are very, very easy and quicker to deploy. And because like you don't have to change the interface much, you can directly use the APIs without any additional logic. So it's very easy and quicker to sort of deploy, and that's why people are going after it. And the final thing actually ties to the first three. If you do like, if you go after not changing interface that much, if you directly use the APIs, the general purpose applications actually become feasible, but specific applications don't become feasible. For example, writing a particular piece of code, while for general purpose code, GPT is decent, but you have to actually fine tune it to a large extent if you are sort of trying to give feedback to a very good developer, right? Or if you're trying to sort of go to advanced level of coding. So general purpose applications are pretty good, like writing an email or writing a blog post. But when it comes to like specific, that is where thick wrappers actually become very, very useful. Now, a good way to understand thin wrappers is actually sort of you go and you try to build some custom GPT in ChatGPT, right? So this is something which I built myself, which is a PM resume coach. You provide a description, you create an image using GPT only. And then you add instruction on top of it, which is sort of a prompt engineering, right? So you talk about like what this particular GPT does. It takes, for example, in this case, it is coaching. It is a coach who has coached a lot of people on their resumes, specifically product managers in FANG and startups. And that is where like with this prompt, and this prompt is not visible to like somebody who is interacting with this custom GPT, but this is the prompt which is around the sort of GPT-3, GPT 3.5, GPT-4 when somebody is interacting with PM Resume Coach. And this is an excellent example of thin wrappers. And now you can see why these are not defensible, because anybody can just do a little bit of prompt engineering and launch this. Anybody can, in fact, like do a little bit of prompt engineering and launch this whole thing on their website and claim that we have built a new AI product which actually coaches people on resumes. So therein lies the dilemma that if people start building these and deploying these quicker products with a lot of marketing, saying that I have actually built something original, what will happen is we see a lot of products getting launched, which is where we started this session, video with, and then they don't have any differentiation. Because they don't have any differentiation, the question becomes, are they defensible, right? Before answering that, let's talk a little bit around thick wrappers. Now, thick wrappers have extensive customization of interface. Thick wrappers, in fact, might not have a chat interface at times, right? So thick wrappers have extensive customization of LLM interface. Thick wrappers have a lot of additional logic on top of APIs. So think of like you building a legal document analyzer. Now, legal document analyzer can have a lot of additional logic which is relevant to law and order literature, which is relevant to advocates when they're preparing for cases. So that layer of additional logic actually make it a thick wrapper, which is like there is a lot of stuff beyond the direct APIs, beyond the direct interface that we have. They also, because we have to write additional logic, because we have to customize that, it also takes time to build and deploy. And that is why like people are not starting with thick wrappers, they're starting with thin wrappers because they are quicker to build and deploy. And finally, like what you'll see is like this additional logic or customization is very relevant whenever you are going to solve a vertical problem. Like we talked about software engineering and coding, right? If Copilot is just built for that, it will have a lot of additional logic customization. In fact, it will be trained on some proprietary data and algorithms, which, this foundational model like GPT-3, 3.5, 4 won't have. So this is usually for vertical like applications like legal, marketing, even product. And then it can also be trained on proprietary data. What I mean by proprietary data is think of, Notion building their own AI. They will use whatever data is available to them and sort of train this foundation model, which is GPT with that data, and then they will launch a new product, right? So three key differences you can see is like, one is customization of interface, the second is additional logic, lots of additional logic, and third is proprietary data and algorithm. All this result in larger time to build and deploy, more specific applications catered through this, and as a result, this is much more defensible. Now, a good example of this actually defensibility is Jasper. In fact, Jasper started as a thin wrapper, as you'll see. It started as a copywriting tool for SEO marketers, but as like ChatGPT launched to the world, and they could see that people are going to use GPT for copywriting, they slightly sort of pivoted, and then they added a lot of features to help marketers with AI, right? So they were a thin wrapper to start with, but they over time, to build defensibility and to build value for marketers, they sort of customized this tool for marketing, right? And now if you look at, like, if you see the difference, so they're using the same foundational model which is ChatGPT is using, but the use case has become very, very specific. They have created a lot of templates, which like ChatGPT does not have. They have added team management facilities, because what you realize in a marketing team is there is a person who is creating the assets, and then there is a person who is approving the assets, and then finally somebody who is taking them live, performing A/B tests if it's a performance marketing campaign, or publishing it on the website if it is a SEO article, right? So a lot of teams collaborate together when it comes to marketing. Now that facility is not available in ChatGPT because it is not going after that use case. But Jasper can go after it because it is creating AI for marketing folks, right? And even if you look at the pricing, because Jasper is doing all these things additionally, it can charge higher, right? So that's how this whole landscape is evolving from thin wrappers to thick wrappers. Now, the last question we are going to answer is, are thin wrappers useless? By now we have understood that thick wrappers definitely have value, and the world is moving towards that in order to build defensibility. But the question becomes, then, are thin wrappers useless? If I'm a PM sitting here today, or if I'm a founder sitting here today, how much should I think about building a thick wrapper versus like starting with a thin wrapper, right? And the answer to this question is, it's actually not useless if you are an incumbent with other advantages. For example, take Notion. When Notion launched Notion AI, it didn't do a lot of work. Like it very quickly launched that thing. And while this is an assumption, you can understand like why it's a strong assumption that Notion had like a thin wrapper, right? The biggest reason for that strong assumption is because Notion didn't need to build a thick wrapper. It had existing distribution, it had proprietary data, and it had network effects. So if a team is onboarded on Notion, they're not going to move to some other copywriting tool just because it's a little bit better, right? And they have data around like, and they have like a lot of data, but they also have data which they have taken explicit consent on, and they can train their models on. And then they have all this distribution, like all these people who are using Notion, right? So all these create a strong moat for Notion. So they just need to launch, a good enough product. They don't even need to launch a very good product. Think of like what Instagram did when Snapchat sort of built stories. Like it didn't match the product. It sort of tried to build a product which was good enough so that the existing distribution does not move away. And that's what a lot of incumbents are doing right now with AI. They are building good enough products, which are usually like thin wrappers with some little bit of fine tuning to the use cases and with the data that they have. But they are not spending a lot of time on it because their moat lies elsewhere, and they can use that to keep the customers, and they can then keep building on top of whatever the basic AI product they built, and they can make it better over time, and possibly they can convert it into a thick wrappers. But they don't need to build thick wrappers to start with. So if you're an incumbent with other advantages, you can actually sort of not spend a lot of resources before you launch the product. You can launch a decent product and then you can work on it. If you are a new product, like we talked about Jasper, so now Jasper was like copywriting assistant. But the good thing is when they started with copywriting assistant, people had not built copywriting assistant. Like this was before ChatGPT launched, and it became like very, very popular among everybody. But as they realized more and more people coming into, writing assistant, they moved to pick a clear vertical use case, which was marketing. And now they have built all these templates, features, team management around marketing, right? So you can see how a company can start with a niche or a broad use case, and not sort of building a thick wrapper around it. But over time, it can sort of acquire customers, it can get funding, and it can build thick wrappers only. The only question is, what is the right time to sort of invest in thick wrappers and build that defensibility? Now, the answer to that question is actually very context dependent. So a lot of you smart folks, I'm sure like you'll figure it out on your own, as long as you understand what are thin wrappers, what are thick wrappers, what's the difference, what are the trade-offs of going after one versus other. And depending on the context you have, I'm sure you'll make the right choice. Thank you for listening to this video. And we have upcoming Products and Sense Strategy course starting 17th of August 2024. So definitely sign up for it if you're interested in that topic. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.